All right, so let's compare Berdych's backhand to Djokovic's backhand. Berdych does a few things wrong in his kinetic chain sequencing. He was a former top 10 player. He usually always lost to Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. He had a very good backhand, I'd say, but it wasn't quite elite because of some of the issues I'm going to be talking about. So for starters, he doesn't quite coil enough. We can see that his racket should get a little bit further back, ideally, but it kind of stops short, so he's not getting optimal power. And it's not so much his arms that's the issue; it's more his torso that's not coiling enough. So the hips and shoulders, or the hips and torso, are basically facing the same direction. Ideally, there should be a bit more separation between the two. So the torso should be slightly more coiled compared to the hips. So he's missing a little bit of stored power right before the shot. But that's not the main issue. The main issue comes right around here. This is critical because right around here, this is where the different body parts should start to have separation. So mainly the hips and torso. Okay, so ideally what you want right around here is the hips to start going forward and the chest to stay closed and the arms to stay back. But what he does is all three of them are kind of coming together forward around the similar time. So he still has a slight delay, but it's not as delayed compared to Djokovic or other elite backhands. So I'm going to show that in a little bit. All right, so if we check out Djokovic's backhand versus Berdych's backhand from the side view, we'll really see some of the key differences that I was mentioning. It'll be much clearer. So Djokovic, during the end of his backswing, right before he transitions into his forward swing, notice how his chest is much further back towards the back fence. So he's more coiled while his hips are maybe oriented here. So there's big hip torso separation here in Djokovic. Now, if we look at Berdych, we'll notice a different story. So Berdych's chest, if we look at his logo, it's kind of facing us, or maybe a little bit back, but and then the torso is maybe facing towards us. So there's only very slight separation between the hips and the torso compared to Djokovic. So Berdych already has minimal hip torso separation, which means minimal stretch across his core. So the stretch I'm referring to is a stretch from the rear side obliques to the opposite side hip. So this stretch, if I were to make Berdych coil his torso much more this way so that his torso faces the back fence, what would happen is that this stretch here would get lengthened. Okay, so there would be more distance and the rubber band would be stretched more taut, therefore storing more elastic energy. Okay, so because Berdych doesn't have that much hip torso separation during the end of his backswing, he's already preparing in a suboptimal way where he lacks adequate hip torso separation. So we'll notice that things only get a little bit worse for Berdych as he continues his forward swing. He already didn't start with very much separation between the hips and torso, and then during the forward swing, he leaks energy early by starting to prematurely open his chest too close together in timing with his hips. So his hips might go right now, and then his torso starts going immediately after. So hips start going now. I'm looking, by the way, if you can't really see it, it's subtle. I'm looking at this back part of his hips, for example. You can see that that part starts moving right about now. Okay, so that's an indicator that the hips are starting to go now. And then the torso is already opening like right now. So that logo is starting to kind of go turn towards the net, and then the arms are coming soon after. Okay, so everything, the arms, hips, and torso are happening very closely together in timing. And I'm going to explain why that's so important, because even though Berdych has a great backhand, um, the difference between him and Djokovic is really what separates good or great versus elite. Okay, so we're going to see in Djokovic how his torso starts facing much further back while his hips are facing kind of towards us. So huge hip torso separation to start. So as I said, that elastic rubber band that's connected between here and here is getting stretched much more tautly. So he's going to have more elastic energy to be able to release into contact. Now, watch here how the hips start to uncoil. So watch. See how the hips are starting to uncoil here? I'm looking, you can also tell visually by the knees. They're starting to turn inwards or forwards towards the net. Now watch. The key thing is right here in these frames that I'm toggling between. He's opening the hips, but the torso is resisting just flying open. Okay, so the torso isn't coming around so soon. So he's preserving and maintaining that hip torso separation as long as he can, much longer than Berdych. Not much longer, but a couple frames longer than Berdych. Okay, the torso even here is still resisting, still facing off. Okay, and then the hips are rotating, and maybe now the torso starts finally getting involved. Okay. So we can see clearly that in Berdych's backhand, there's not much racket lag. All right. So what I mean by that is the racket isn't really going behind his hands like in this direction very much compared to Djokovic. And here's why. All right. Look how Djokovic's racket goes much further behind his hands. So he's getting much more racket lag. And the reason is because in Berdych's backhand, the arms are a bit too organized, meaning they're getting a bit involved a little too early. There's not enough stretch and relaxation in the system, and in Berdych's backhand, the arms begin accelerating with the body instead of being dragged by the body. All right, so Djokovic does a better job of letting his arms kind of hang back for the ride and letting his torso, letting his body carry his arms during the end of his backswing and early start of his forward swing. So Djokovic has more sequencing gaps between hips, torso, and arms. So hips go, torso hangs back, and then the arms. So what Berdych does is that you can see right here his hips go. Okay, his hips start to go. I'm looking at his left glute. They start to turn, but his chest goes almost immediately after with it. Okay, instead of staying back, and then his arm also, his arms start to also follow the torso too early. So watch. So if we compare that to Djokovic now, we can see at the end of his backswing, as he starts transitioning into his forward swing during the drop, you can see that the hips start opening here, but notice how the chest stays more closed, okay? So he's preserving the hip-shoulder separation, okay? And then his left arm, or actually both of his arms, are just staying more back, okay? I can tell because his left arm is staying more connected to his left chest there. So watch. This is when his arm starts to actually pull forward ahead of the chest, right about now. Now the arms go, okay? Whereas Berdych was starting to have his arms go like right around here. His arms are already starting to pull ahead forward a little too early. So watch the elite separation. You'll really see it in when I play a little bit faster speed. So watch hips and then torso. So it goes hips and then torso. Hips, torso, hips, torso, and then the arm slings at the last moment right before contact. Okay, so if we go back to Berdych, Now see if you can spot the lack of sequencing gaps. So everything kind of comes too much together. Okay. That's why it doesn't look as aesthetic as Djokovic's. And then we can see that in the frames right before contact, okay, it looks like his arms are just pulling through the shot more as opposed to his body pulling his arms through the shot. So his arms are already active, doing too much work by themselves, and the racket path is being more guided rather than released. When I say released, I mean ideally there would have been enough stretch from the delay of segments that would have caused an elastic stretch across the core and torso, stretch between the hips and torso being separated, and then that would be released right before and into contact. So he's lacking a little bit of that. On this shot, he also kind of does the same. On this shot, he also kind of has the same problem. That's kind of why he doesn't hit this shot very well. So right here he plants, and then his hips start uncoiling right around there. Okay. And then his arms start pulling ahead right there. So his arms should have hung back a little bit longer. And we can see the results of this clearly because notice how he barely has any racket lag on the shot. I know this is a tough deep ball, but I'll show you an example where I think it was Sloane Stevens. She also got a deep ball, but her swing looks so much better, even though it was a deep ball, which is tough to handle. So notice how Sloane Stevens does such a nice job here on this deep ball. It looks aesthetically much better than what Berdych did, even though it's right at her feet. The key part I'm looking at is this beginning part, this transition from backswing to forward swing. Look how much racket lag she gets. Look how her racket is lagging behind her her leg, right? We won't see the same thing with Berdych. See, Berdych's racket doesn't get to this position here, which you'll see Djokovic, Sloane Stevens, and other elite backhands get into. And that's because, look, once again, Berdych's arms start getting involved too early. They're already starting to get active right here. So he misses that crucial lag window. Whereas Sloane Stevens, she allows the arms to hang back and relax. Her chest stays closed a little bit longer, and that's why her racket is able to lag behind her her back leg, and therefore that's going to lead to a much more consistent result, especially on those pickup shots. So now let's check out the GOAT Djokovic, and he also gets a deep ball here, kind of close to his feet, and we'll notice the same elite pattern as Sloane Stevens. Notice how his racket lags behind his hands almost at a 45-degree angle here. That racket is getting behind his back leg. And once again, why is that happening? It's happening because he's not activating his arms early here. Berdych would have started activating his arms right around here. Djokovic waits a little bit. He waits for the body to initiate and pull the arms through. So right now, right around here. So as the racket drops, he's transferring his weight onto the front leg. And then right around here, the hips start to uncoil. The chest hangs back just for a little bit afterwards. And then the arms pull through only afterwards. All right, compare that to Berdych one more time, and you'll see why Berdych shanked the shot right here. All right, so see how his arms are getting active just a little bit early right there? Right there, his arms are already starting to slightly pull ahead instead of relaxing and hanging back, which would allow his racket to lag a bit more. I think it was Sloane Stevens. She also got a deep ball, but her swing looks so much better, even though it was a deep ball, which is tough to handle. So once again, see if you can really spot this right here from this frame to this frame. Notice how his arm starts to pull forward. It's a little bit, just a few milliseconds too early. Okay, and that's where he really goes wrong. So the one cue to fix this is to let your hips go first, but keep your chest back for a split second. Okay, so right around here, the hips should start to go, but the chest should still stay closed a little bit longer. Okay, so if you're interested in having your technique analyzed by me, it can be any stroke, forehand, backhand, serve, volley, and I'll help you figure out what's going wrong with it. Compare it to the pros, break down exactly what you're doing wrong and how to fix it. Okay, I've been studying slow motion footage for over 10 years, and I will break it down to a T and tell you how to fix it. The hardest part is honestly changing your stroke because you're so used to doing it the way you've always been doing because it's in your muscle memory. But for those who are dedicated and really want to improve, feel free to reach out to me. I'll help you get to that next level by understanding the proper technique.
He's creating tough shots for Federer, but Federer's still able to come up from defense to offense one more time. This is a 90-mile-an-hour